Hey, how's it going guys? This is Dave 2D and this is my review of the Acer V15 Nitro Black Edition with the Skylake update. Now, this laptop has always been a very popular device. It's relatively inexpensive, it's thin, and it performs well. But recently, other companies like Dell and Lenovo and Asus have put out some really strong competitor devices at this price point. So let's take a look to see if the V15 Nitro is still a good purchase. Alright, it's a simple black box, you get the laptop inside. It also comes with some pamphlets and the AC adapter comes in a separate box. The top surface is plastic with this kind of corrugated or ribbed texture. It doesn't feel particularly premium, but I think it looks pretty nice and fingerprints don't show up on this kind of surface. The bottom is a soft touch material and there's some big rubber feet here, and you'll notice that there's some screws around and you can unscrew them to access the internals, but it's a lot more complicated than it seems. So after you remove all the screws, you flip it over and then you can carefully pop open the keyboard and then you have access to the two drive slots. But to upgrade or replace the memory, you actually have to remove the entire motherboard to get underneath. So it's a bit of a gnarly process, but if you need to, you can get it done. The build quality overall is good. The screen flex isn't too bad, and the keyboard is also pretty rigid, but a couple things do worry me. The first is that soft touch finish. So this is stuff that's really nice when it's new, but it scratches easily, and over time it can look pretty gross. But the other thing is this silver hinge area. So the hinge itself is fine. The mechanism seems solid, but the plastic they use is painted silver, and if it wears off at the corners, and it will over time, you'll see this gray plastic underneath the paint, and that can look ugly. But overall, it's a pretty good build. Now the specs of the review unit I have, it's a Skylake Core i7 running at 2.6 GHz, a GTX 960M, a 15-inch 1080p screen, 8 gigs of RAM, a 1TB hard drive, and it's currently going for around $1,000 US. So price-wise, this is like $50 more than a Dell 7559, but around $50 less than the Lenovo Y700. It's also slightly thinner than both of them. Now on the right, we have most of the ports. So there's a couple USB 3s, a USB 3.1, an Ethernet jack, and the power connection. So I actually prefer my power connection on the left side because I'm right-handed for like using my mouse. And then on the left side, we have the audio jack, an SD card slot, and then another USB 3 port. When you open it up, you get that soft touch material all over, and there's a number pad that shifts the keyboard again over to the left. So the layout is okay, but the arrow keys have that thing where you might hit shift when you're trying to press up, and the enter key has this thing where, you know what, I don't even know why they did this, it's just weird. But typing is pretty good. The keys are a little stiff, but I like it more than the Dell 7559. There is backlighting for the keyboard, but it's red, so some people may not like that. And there's also this strip of red light at the hinge that turns on and off with the backlighting. The trackpad performs reasonably well. It's a smooth plastic surface, but tracking is nice and it's pretty responsive, but the buttons feel kind of cheap and clicking the buttons isn't very satisfying, but overall the trackpad isn't bad. The screen is a 15.6-inch 1080p IPS panel. Now the color accuracy is fair and it comes reasonably well calibrated out of the box, but it's not that bright, and for an IPS panel, the viewing angles are kind of poor, but for playing games head-on, it's still a solid screen, and it's got a matte finish, which I always like. Now there is a 4K option, which I've seen. It's a nice screen, but you'll probably want to stick with the 1080p simply because of the battery life, which we'll get into later. There's also a 720p camera up top, which looks okay. The 1TB drive is 5400 RPM. It's expectedly slow, and I'd recommend swapping it out for an SSD if you can afford it. Now, if you get some faster drives in there or use fast externals, this machine will comfortably handle video edits even with 4K footage, and gaming on this thing is great. So, in the past, when I do notebook reviews, I play a bunch of games that I like, I film some of it, and then I talk about my experiences with them. So I don't use gaming benchmarks because I'm personally not a fan of putting up benchmark numbers in a video. I mean, there's a ton of websites for that, but I'm not sure what you guys want. Do you guys want benchmarks? Do you want me to keep it the way it is? Like, I'm totally open to suggestions. Let me know in the comments below. So this guy will play Dota 2 and Heroes of the Storm really well on high, like easily over 100 frames per second when you're laning, and at worst like 50 frames per second on team fights. Rainbow Six you can run at high settings and get over 60 frames per second, but if you really want to play on ultra, it really depends on the map. Like some of the maps that are darker, you can still hit 50, 60 frames per second with everything maxed out, but if you have a map that's really brightly lit, it can drop to around 40 frames per second on ultra. So games like GTA 5 and Witcher 3, you can hit 60 frames per second, but you'll need to be on medium graphics settings or lower. The speakers are really good. They don't have much bass, but they get pretty loud and they're still really clear at maximum volume. Even when it's idling, the fans will kick in once in a while, but it's a quiet fan, it's around 25 decibels. But under heavier load, the fans can get pretty loud. It can hit 40 decibels when you're playing games, which is actually one of the louder Skylake laptops I've reviewed. But the weird thing is that even with these loud fans, the thermal situation isn't so good. So at the hottest spot, it's almost 120 Fahrenheit, and this is like 15 or 20% hotter than the Inspiron 7559 or the Lenovo Y700. Now, it gets hot, but I didn't notice any throttling in games, even after a couple hours of full load. So aside from the discomfort of just higher temperatures, it's not that big of a deal because the components can handle this kind of heat. It has a 135 watt AC adapter, and here's a really big orange for scale. So a full charge takes a little bit less than 2 hours, but battery life on this thing is poor. It's a 52 watt hour battery, which is small, even for a 15-inch laptop, and I was getting around 2.5 hours of regular use with screen at 75% and less than an hour of use while I was playing games with screen at max brightness. So, I mean, if you lower the screen brightness, you'll obviously get more battery life, but yeah, battery life on this thing is short at best. Okay, recap. Acer V15 Nitro, it's got a plastic build that feels pretty durable, but the soft touch finish can show its age if you're not careful. It has a 15.6-inch 1080p screen that has nice colors, but it's not that bright, and viewing it on an angle isn't very nice either. The keyboard is decent to type on, but the red backlighting isn't for everyone, and the trackpad is respectable. It's one of the better trackpads at this price point. Inside, the Core i7 and the GTX 960M have great performance, but the temperatures run pretty hot. There's also a 1TB hard drive, a spare M2 drive socket, and 8 gigs of RAM, all of which are upgradable, but it's a relatively invasive procedure to get inside there. And juicing this is a 52 watt hour battery that'll last you around 2 to 3 hours of regular use. Alright, so a couple closing thoughts. The V15 Nitro is a strong performer, but there's a couple things you should be aware of if you're interested in purchasing this device. First is the battery life, secondly are the thermals, and both of these are kind of a result of how thin the device is. When you have a thin chassis like this, you're just gonna have smaller fans or weaker fans, and you're gonna have less batteries or smaller batteries, and that's what you get. A device that performs well, it's really thin and it's inexpensive, but it runs hot and the battery life is pretty short. But if those are things you don't care about, like if you don't care about battery life, you don't really care about having a hot laptop, this is a good pickup. But if you do care about it, you might want to look elsewhere. That's the end of this review. Hope you guys liked it. Thumbs if you did, subs if you loved it. It's been nice. I'll see you guys next time.